Hello students, in today's video I'm going to show you one of the best openings for the black pieces, the Caro-Kann Defense. Of course, it's impossible to show you all the lines, but I hope that after this lesson you will be able to go online and get decent positions to play for a win right away. Our opening starts after white plays e4 and we're going to be playing the move c6. In a nutshell, we want to strike with d5 and not yet close our light square bishop. Most popular move here for white by far is d4. Now we're going to be playing d5, and in this position white has a variety of choices, and we're going to look at quite a few lines. Knight c3, the classical variation, the exchange variation if they take, and also if they push the pawn, which would be called the advanced variation. To start, I would like to look at exchange variation, as lots of beginners and intermediate level players like to play this move. Here we're going to be taking with the pawn, as taking with the queen would just allow white to play knight to c3 and hit our queen. And the most precise move, as far as I'm aware, is bishop to d3. Even Bobby Fischer was playing this system for the white pieces for some games. However, the most popular move that you will encounter is going to be knight f3, and I would like to start with this one. Here it's very important not to play the move bishop to g4, as you will be just allowing white to play the initiative. Strategically, of course, that's where the bishop is going to be placed later on, but it's imprecise to start with it right away. Here white could play h3. If we take the knight, we're losing the so-called bishop pair advantage. I hope to cover the strategic element in my next video. And if we retreat to h5 to keep the pin, which would be the natural choice for black, we are running into g4, bishop g6, and then after knight to e5, white is threatening this h4, h5, and it's very uncomfortable to think what to do with the light square bishop. As simply, if you are going to play h6 in order to have this hideout for the bishop from the h pawn of white, then white is going to be taking your bishop on g6, and this pawn structure where you have to take with the f pawn away is usually very terrible. For example, if we're going to be playing a move like e6 and white plays the move h4, and then you're like, oops, they're coming to threaten me, and you play a move like h6, this is considered to be horrendous for black, and usually these positions are even winning for white. So I do not recommend playing bishop g4 right away, and rather starting with the move knight to c6. The most common reply here at your level is going to be bishop d3, and now we could be playing the bishop move to g4. As this time, after they play h3, we could simply take on f3, and the pawn on d4 drops. You will simply be a pawn up. So as we go back, white needs to protect the d4 pawn, as we're applying a lot of pressure on it. They're going to be playing the move c3. Here we're going to be playing queen to c7, and this move a lot of the times prevents the white's bishop, dark square bishop development to f4, as well as prepare in the future ideas of e5 taking over the center. For example, if white castles, we can be playing e6, say rook to e1, bishop to d6. After h3, now we can simply retreat without any worries. And after a developing move like knight bd2, we could be placing the knight on e7 in order to have a way to play for a win. We're going to be playing at some point f6, and then e5 to take over the center. Alternative plan is just to play the move bishop g6. After they're going to take, we're going to take with the h pawn towards the center, and this way we're going to be exchanging our bad bishop, the same color as the pawns in the center of ours, for their good bishop, the opposite color to their pawns in the center. Now let's go back and take a look at one more line. Over here, they could also be playing the move bishop to d3 instead of knight f3. This is something that requires some precision. I recommend the move knight to f6, which simply prepares the move bishop to g4, and we hope to get to similar lines if they play something like knight to f3. It would be logical for white to play h3, which for now prevents the development of our light square bishop. And this time we're going to change plans and go for the e5 break. So knight to c6, attacking the d4 pawn, for example c3, and now e5. Over here they have nothing better than taking, as we're threatening to both take the pawn in some cases and also push in some cases. So say takes, and we're achieving an isolated pawn, which is a defect in the endgame. However, in the middle game we're having more space, which promises us to have a little bit better knights and bishop in the middle game as we have more central control. And we're also doing all of this while leading the development and developing the initiative against the white bishop. White has a few ways to play, and the most ambitious is the queen e2 move, which pins the knight to our king. Over here, we need to play queen to e7. And a lot of the times, black is struggling to find the correct plan, where to put the dark square bishop, how am I going to castle. And I love the move b6 over here, which prepares to move our bishop to a6 square, as the queen cannot move due to deadly discovery attacks, and then we're going to castle long. For example, the best move here for white is knight to e3, so that after bishop a6 they could block the diagonal. For example, let's say bishop a6, and now if you're wondering what happens if they take, we simply have a checkmate with knight to f3, which is a double check, and then queen to e1 would be a very good game, an opening preparation, an opening video if you get this for the black pieces. So after bishop a6, the main idea is to play knight to b5, and now we could simply castle long, play d4, and even though objectively the position is equal, I prefer black due to our chances to develop initiative and tactical opportunities. So that is going to be the exchange variation, and now we move to the classical variation, which is going to happen after white doesn't take on d5, but rather plays the move knight to c3 or knight to d2. It doesn't matter where they go because we're going to be taking anyways. And there are a couple of moves here for black. Bishop f5 is considered to be the old main line. Maybe it is still considered to be the main line. It's the most popular move, thus is way more theoretical. There's also knight to d7 preparing knight f6. And the move that I recommend to play is it's much simpler. Simply knight to f6. White has nothing better than taking on f6. Then we're going to be taking with the e-pawn. While we have a defect in the pawn structure, we're going to have more kingside pawns, and we're going to try to use them. This also helps develop our dark square bishop. And in general, the main plans for white, especially if the castle short, is going to be maintaining and not allowing us to push our majority while expanding on the queen side and having a little bit more space. In general, black is going to be very solid, no weaknesses, no bad pieces, and very easy development, as I'm going to show you. White's main move over here is pawn to c3. It's the move that prepares this battery and quick attack against our king. We're going to be playing bishop d6, and almost always we're going to try to castle. Well, play bishop d6, then castle. Then rook is going to come to e8, after which we're going to play knight d7, knight to f8. The bishop is going to try to get to squares like f5 or g4. The knight is perhaps going to reroute itself to e6 if the opportunities allow us. And these moves can be implemented in almost all cases, except for the move knight to e6. This depends on the white setup a lot. So let's see what happens. White is going to play bishop to d3, black plays castles, and white immediately starts attacking our king. First, we're going to land a check on e8, and this used to be the critical position. Black tried all sorts of moves like g6, like h6, and failed to fully equalize. After black started playing the more modern move, h5. Of course, we cannot say that it fully equalizes, but it fights way better against the white's army than the other two moves. From here on, we're going to be using the h-pawn as an attacking pawn if they're going to castle short, and we're going to simply leave the pawn on h5 if they're going to castle long, and it's going to help us stop their pawn storm on that side of the board. So let's say they're going to castle long in this game. For example, play bishop to e3. Almost always we play knight d7 and knight f8 in all of these positions. Let's say they're castling long, and we're playing the move knight to f8. For example, king to b1. Let's say bishop to e6. And I believe black has this solid development and even maybe better chances to strike on the queen side than white chances to strike on the king side. What is happening? This pawn on f6 is covering the e5 and g5 squares so that opponent's knight can't land on either. If they play for h3, g4, we can always not allow them to open up the file by pushing h4. And also, There are no checks even available as long as the knight is staying there on f8. On the other hand, black can play for moves like b5, b4, queen a5s. A lot of times white gets space on the queen side or center, if you will, by playing c4. And here black's main idea is going to be preparing b5. So this rook c8 is targeting the discovery attack. And black has equal chances from this position. I don't think that you should be worrying about getting to this particular middle game. Now let's take a look at the position if white castles short. So I'm going to show you the first moves again. How are we getting into those positions? Knight to f6. And this time white is going to castle short. And when they're going to do that, we're going to be using the h-pawn as an attacking pawn. So we go h4, and eventually they have to stop us with h3, as the threat of black playing h3 at some point is something that usually players not want to deal when they're playing white. So from here on, we play the same setup, like knight to d7, for example, bishop e3, and then knight to f8, bishop to e6, with similar ideas for the black pieces. No weaknesses, very solid. White has this marginal space advantage if they play the move pawn to c4. All right, and what is left for us for today is perhaps the advanced variation and maybe a little bit of the so-called variation Panov Attack. Now, I was thinking, which line should I choose to make a video on in the advanced variation? And nowadays, it's very popular to play the move c5. However, I'm going to give you an easy plan of the main variation because I'm able to depict you a classical middle game plan that will be easy for you to remember and use against most setups of white. In general, the problem with this variation for black is that white has so many different ways to play that, and so does black, of course. That makes it very theoretical. First of all, we have to know that after the move h4, we cannot play a typical move e6, as our bishop is simply getting trapped. So that's a caveat, not to run into something like this. And we're going to be playing the move h5 and then follow up with our typical middle game plan. But in order to depict that middle game plan, let's pick moves that you're likely going to encounter, like knight to f3, example e6, let's say bishop to e2. Black's main idea of fighting back against white's space advantage is going to be the move c5. I recommend this easy plan where we're going to be placing the knights on d7, e7, then playing the move c5, and this knight from e7 is going to go to c6, after which you could just simply finish the development by playing bishop e7 and castles. For example, let's say knight to d7, let's say castles, not the most ambitious moves as white, but very natural. Say knight to e7, for example, knight to b2, c5, for example, c3, and now this knight from e7 is going to go to c6. As you saw, the c5 pawn was always guarded by the knight. For example, white is going to play rook to e1, and here we can play the move bishop to e7 and castles, and follow it up with the queen side expansion with pushing the b pawn or with the queen on b6. And then h6 at some point could also be played prophylactically in order to keep the bishop on this long diagonal. So one more time. The main plan of yours in the advanced variations, unless they're going to be playing for some kind of crazy gambit where you will have to play very concretely, we can place the knight on d7, then on e7, play c5, knight to c6. This usually is sometimes countered by the white pieces when they're playing for the quick c4. So then what we're able to play is simply take on c4 and place our knight on b6 and d5. So for example, knight b6, bishop to b3, and then the other knight could be landing on d5 with bishop e7 and castles. Once again, not a grandmaster choice for white, but something that you may encounter at club level player. And the last variation that I have to show you today in order to sleep well at night is the so-called Panov Attack, where they take on d5 and play c4. I'm going to show you a simple line for the black pieces that is non-main line. First, we must play the move knight to f6 so that after they take the pawn, we could take with the knight instead of the queen. Once again, she would be hit by knight c3. Then the main move is knight c3, applying more pressure on d5. And over here, we're going to play a more rare move, pawn to g6. If they're ever going to be taking on d5, you will get middle game where you're going to be playing against queen's isolated pawn. That's a clear target. Your main plan is going to be trying to blockade that and then put pressure against it. Endgame is wonderful for you, while in the middle game, white has a little bit more space and therefore you will be lacking a little bit of room for your pieces. Instead, queen b3 is the most popular move, applying even more pressure on d5. Over here, we're going to ignore that, and they're going to be very happy to win the pawn. We're completely ignoring it. Castles. Then they're going to be playing bishop to e2 in order to prepare bishop f3, as sometimes black can put the third attacker on the pawn. And over here, we're going to be playing a more rare move once again, queen to b6. After we exchange the queens, our main plan is going to be knight a6, and this move prepares knight b4, knight c7 in order to apply more pressure on d5. For example, bishop to f3, now knight to a6. If they're going to be playing the move a3, you could play knight b4 anyways, because the a pawn is pinned. Usually people just play knight e2, then we're going to be playing knight b4, threatening the fork. And at the same time, we're threatening to attack the pawn on d5 with the rook the third time. For example, castles, rook d8, and there were over 100 Grandmaster games that followed this particular line, where black won the pawn back, white still has isolated pawn, on the other hand, black has double pawns on the b file, and objectively the position is very close to equality. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please consider hiring me as your personal online chess coach. My contacts are on the right. If you wish me to go into other lines and depict more advanced variations, please let me know in the comments. Now it's time for you to go and practice this, play some online games. I wish you a lot of wins and see you in the next video. Thank you.